how do you see the relationships in the world that you're stepping into? And how do you see them? How do you relate to them? How do you make them make sense to you? Right? And in doing that, you bring a original perspective to the character, to the script. Cool. Joanna says, how do you start the process to find the humanity or relationships that shape a character that is villainous, otherworldly, or what would be an extreme version of part of you? Oh, okay. So Joanna is saying, how do you start how do you find humanity in a character that's villainous? Well, number one, I would say don't look at the character as villainous. Like, you saw Hitler didn't think he was wrong. Thanos didn't think he was wrong. First of all, because I think about this often. Like characters that we see on screen, on paper, in books, on stage, whatever, they can only be written from the perspective of a human experience because that's all we know. Like we don't have an alien or anything like that coming and giving us a different perspective, right? So if you think about that, human beings write stories. And so therefore, all that the character can come from is from a human perspective. And human perspective from my experience is that the bad guy never thinks they're the bad guy, right? There's a CIA agent interview that I watch on the CIA agent who she's former CIA agent. She left and she started a company utilizing all her resources that she had created over the years in the CIA to help people around the world. I think for stop human trafficking and all these other things. But in her interview, she goes, I've worked behind the lines with Al Qaeda and I've worked, United States. I've worked all over undercover and all these other things. And she goes, the one thing they all have in common is they all think they're the good guys. They all think they're right. And it's true. Like everybody depends on where you go, depends on what the perspective is. Just like Einstein said about, distance and everything is like, what's the center of the universe? It depends on where you're at because it's all relative. It's the center keeps moving depending on where you're standing at that moment. So what I would say, the process to start looking at a villain is the same way you would approach the hero, which is going, how do I feel about these? What I loved about Thanos and if you haven't seen it by now, like I try not to give out any spoilers, but what I loved about Thanos was that the whole time we see him as this, like from Thanos is coming for I don't know how many movies. They're like, Thanos is coming, the bad guy's coming. But then finally we get towards the end of his journey and he explains the reason he's doing what he's doing. And he honestly believes, like he literally goes, by me wiping, like everyone is suffering. So in order to continue life as we know it, if wiping out half of the population allows the other half to flourish, I'll be the bad guy. I'll be the guy willing to do that because nobody else is willing to do it. And so I don't agree with how he's doing it, but I understand why he's doing it. And he cares so much about the continuation of the existence of life as we know it in all forms across the entire universe, that he's willing to not only murder half of the population, but he's willing to be the one that they go, you're the bad guy. And you're for all eternity, we'll know you as the bad guy. And so I would look at their humanity. I would look at why they're doing what they're doing. Like, other than like a Ted Bundy or, you know, like a true, I don't know if sociopath is the right word, but someone who's just not there, like, the Joker or something like that. Somebody who just is so disconnected from reality that they don't understand the difference between right and wrong and things like that. Um, I would approach it from, they're not the villain. Again, Hitler didn't think he was wrong. He, I can't speak for him in the sense, but you know, whatever he was doing, he justified in his mind as being the right thing to do for whatever reason. And I do it, like, we all do it all day long, especially people who are like, I don't know, like me, that's just like, well, if they were to move the door over there, it'd be more efficient. If people, I always have this thing when I get stuck behind somebody at a green arrow, like a left green turn arrow. I'm like, if you can't, and they sit there and they can't figure it out. I'm like, I feel like if you can't navigate a left green turn arrow, you shouldn't have your license. Like, I'm not taking anybody's, like, killing anybody, but that's simple, man. How is that any different than going, if this person's license was taken, the world would be a better place? Is any different than saying that if by wiping out half of the universe, the universe will be a better place? So we're looking for their humanity. How do I feel about this? Why? Right? Don't look at the bad guy as the bad guy. Look at the bad guy as a human. Just find their humanity, find out why they're doing what they're doing. Because, and I'll tell you this, being in the Marine Corps and everything else, it was an eye-opener after I got out and I really was able to look back and reflect, is that, and experience in Iraq and everything else, is like, the United States, and I love the United States, but not we as a collective, but like the image of the United States and leaders throughout time have made some really bad decisions that have then caused these people to think of us like the enemy, and because of these actions. And now most of us go through life like caring about people and everything else, and you go to certain countries and people hate us, not because of what you as the individual did, but what the image of the country has done. And it's like, and who knows, and like at the time I thought what I was doing was the right thing because I didn't understand the other side of it. So to somebody in the world, you could be the bad guy.